April 28, 1945. 9:47 p.m. Berlin, Führerbunker. Heinrich Himmler stands in a moonlit forest 90 miles north, waiting for a car that will never arrive. In the concrete tomb beneath the Reich chancellery, Adolf Hitler grips a BBC transcript with trembling hands. The paper announces what Hitler has just learned. His Reichsführer-SS tried to negotiate surrender behind his back. Himmler believed the West would abandon Stalin. He offered unconditional surrender to America and Britain alone. Tonight, that fantasy dies in a single radio broadcast. The West has rejected him, publicly, and now Hitler knows. What Himmler failed to understand would destroy him and Germany's last hope of escape. In the bunker's map room, outdated charts show a Reich that no longer exists. Soviet shells pound the streets above every 90 seconds. Concrete dust settles on colored pins marking phantom divisions. Hitler commands armies that have ceased to obey. General Krebs reports the day's losses in a voice drained of inflection. The overhead bulbs flicker with each distant explosion. 150 kilometers north, Himmler maintains separate headquarters in Hohenleuken, a sanatorium-turned-command post surrounded by pine forests and spring fog. Through sterile hospital corridors now lined with encrypted radio equipment. SS officers carry orders between rooms that once held surgical theaters. His office overlooks gardens where antenna arrays replace flower beds. Here, the SS Reichsführer controls what remains. The Gestapo, the concentration camps, scattered divisions across northern Germany. Field commanders no longer know which orders to follow. Hitler's or Himmler's. The physical distance mirrors something deeper. Hitler believes in Wagnerian endings. Himmler calculates survival. Between them, 2.5 million German soldiers still fight. But the Reich has fractured into two competing illusions. Since February, Himmler operates on a single assumption. Western powers fear Soviet expansion more than they hate Nazi Germany. In his Hohenleuken office, he studies maps showing the Red Army's westward surge. He sketches a post-war Europe where Germany becomes a buffer state. The SS apparatus remains intact. Churchill's anti-communism overrides demands for unconditional surrender. Count Folke Bernadotte of the Swedish Red Cross has facilitated prisoner exchanges. Jews released from Ravensbrück, Scandinavian inmates transferred to Sweden. Himmler interprets humanitarian cooperation as diplomatic opening. He sees himself as indispensable, the man who can deliver order from chaos. What he doesn't grasp is that Yalta has already sealed Germany's fate. In February, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin signed an agreement. No separate peace will be entertained. Every conversation with Bernadotte is political theater to Himmler. To the Allies, it's merely humanitarian logistics. The gap between these interpretations is total. On the night of April the 23rd, in a darkened Lübeck apartment, Himmler speaks the words he thinks will save Germany. A single desk lamp illuminates the wooden table. Across from him, Count Bernadotte maintains diplomatic composure. Himmler offers unconditional surrender to the Western Allies alone, excluding the Soviet Union. His hands move constantly, adjusting glasses, smoothing papers, gesturing at invisible maps. Witnesses describe him as nervous, talking rapidly. He alternates between grand claims about preserving European civilization and tactical details about releasing prisoners as goodwill. Bernadotte knows immediately this proposal is dead. The Swedish government will relay it because protocol demands it. But the Yalta Agreement is public knowledge. As Bernadotte's car pulls away into Baltic fog, its headlights cutting through darkness, Himmler stands in the doorway watching. He returns inside to wait. Somewhere beneath conscious thought, doubt forms. But he silences it with calculations and scenarios. The Swedish Foreign Ministry transmits Himmler's proposal on April 24th. Within 48 hours, Allied responses crystallize. In the White House map room, President Truman reads the summary. He writes in the margin with blue fountain pen, "Rejected. Inform Stalin immediately." In war rooms beneath Whitehall, Churchill dictates a message to Moscow. Britain will honor Yalta. No separate negotiations. His private secretary types while Churchill paces, cigar smoke trailing through the low-ceilinged room. What Himmler imagines as high-stakes chess is barely worth a footnote in Allied capitals. Meanwhile, in Hohenleichen, Himmler waits by a secure telephone. He interprets silence as consideration rather than contempt. His adjutants bring routine reports, troop movements, supply shortages, intelligence summaries. But he wants word from Stockholm. Every hour without Allied response deepens his error. By April 27th, he tells an SS officer, "They're considering terms." Outside the window, spring rain falls on the pine forests. But the real storm is gathering elsewhere. At 7 o'clock on the morning of April 28th, BBC Radio's German service broadcasts a bulletin. The announcer's voice is matter-of-fact. Heinrich Himmler has attempted to negotiate surrender through Swedish channels. Both the United States and Great Britain have categorically rejected the proposal. They reaffirm their commitment to unconditional surrender negotiated jointly with the Soviet Union. The broadcast lasts 40 seconds. In Hohenleichen's signals room, staff hears it on a shortwave receiver crackling with static. An SS officer carries a typed transcript up 2 flights of stairs. His boots echo in the empty corridor. He knocks softly on Himmler's door. Inside, Himmler sits at breakfast. Porcelain, silver, coffee steaming in a cup. He's reading overnight intelligence about Soviet positions around Berlin. He reads the transcript. Witnesses report his face turns completely white. He sets down the coffee cup with such force it cracks the saucer. A sharp sound in the quiet room. His hand trembles, still holding the paper. The data is irrefutable. The West hasn't just refused. They've announced his gambit to the world. Every Allied commander now knows. Every SS officer will soon learn. And Hitler will know within hours. At approximately 9 o'clock that evening, in the bunker's conference room, Hitler receives the BBC transcript from Joseph Goebbels. Harsh overhead bulbs illuminate the space. The smell of damp concrete and diesel fumes hangs in the air. Goebbels places the single sheet on the table. His face shows nothing. Around the room's perimeter, officers stand frozen. Generals Krebs and Bergdorf against the wall. Adjutant Otto Günsche near the door. 2 SS guards at attention. Hitler reads for 30 seconds. His left hand trembles, the tremor extending up his forearm. No one speaks. The ventilation system hums. Somewhere above, another Soviet shell impacts. A dull thud through the floor. Hitler sets down the paper with deliberate care. Then he speaks. Everyone present will remember the tone. Not rage, but something colder. Betrayal confirmed. Der treue Heinrich, he says, almost to himself. Loyal Heinrich. He orders Himmler stripped of all ranks. He commands Hermann Fegelein arrested immediately. In this moment, the last link between Hitler's bunker and Himmler's Northern Empire snaps. Outside, Soviet shells whistle at 90-second intervals. But Hitler's fury targets not the Red Army. It targets the man he trusted most. Within hours, the bunker issues orders for Himmler's arrest. But the infrastructure to execute them no longer exists. Radio contact with Hohenleichen is intermittent. Static drowns half the frequencies. In the communications room, the radio operator adjusts dials uselessly, listening to white noise. SS units across northern Germany receive contradictory commands. Some hear orders to arrest Himmler. Others receive commands from Himmler himself to ignore Berlin. Local commanders make their own calculations. Several begin independent surrender negotiations with approaching Allied forces. In Hohenlicken, Himmler learns he's been declared a traitor. The news arrives through a loyal adjutant who intercepts bunker traffic. Himmler goes into hiding immediately. He shaves his mustache. He dons a Wehrmacht private's uniform. He joins a column of refugees heading west. Fegelein is arrested in civilian clothes, attempting to flee. He's executed by firing squad in the Reich Chancellery Garden at dawn on April 29th. The shots echo across rubble. The SS command structure dissolves. Generals who tied their survival to Himmler scramble to prove loyalty to a Führer who will be dead in 48 hours. In Hohenlicken's library, rows of genealogical charts line the walls. Volumes of racial pseudoscience fill the shelves. Here, surrounded by the architecture of Nazi ideology, Himmler built his diplomatic strategy. The doctrine insisted democracies would fracture under pressure. That Churchill's anti-communism would trump Allied solidarity. That capitalism and communism could never sustain partnership. A clerk enters the empty library now. Footsteps echoing on marble floors. He finds Himmler's notes scattered across a reading table, projections, scenarios, contingencies, all built on premises that existed only in Nazi imagination. What Nazi intelligence never grasped was genuine Allied cohesion. The Atlantic Charter, the Yalta Agreements, 6 years of shared sacrifice, these forged bonds real enough to survive wedge attempts. The separate peace wasn't a bad gamble. It was a fundamental error, a misreading of how democracies operate under existential threat. Moreover, Himmler misread his own value. Control of the SS made him a negotiating partner in his mind. In reality, Allied planners had already designated the SS a criminal organization to be dissolved entirely. While Himmler imagined himself as a transitional figure, the Nuremberg framework was being drafted. He offered the West something they needed. They had already decided to destroy everything he represented. The collapse accelerates Germany's final disintegration. Hitler marries Eva Braun on April 29th in a brief bunker ceremony. A minor official performs the rites while Soviet shells shake the walls. That same night, Hitler dictates his political testament, expelling both Himmler and Göring from the party for treason. His secretary types the document, fingers cramping on the keys. On April 30th, Hitler shoots himself. The pistol shot echoes briefly in his private study. Within hours, his body is carried up emergency stairs, soaked in gasoline, burned in a shell crater. Goebbels orders remaining staff to attempt breakout through Soviet lines. Most die in the attempt. Admiral Dönitz assumes nominal leadership from northern Germany. His surrender negotiations with the Allies are transparent formalities. German officers arrive at Allied headquarters with white flags and outdated maps. The answer is always the same: unconditional surrender. No negotiations. Himmler wanders through British-occupied territory for 3 weeks, disguised as a Wehrmacht sergeant. He sleeps in barns and bombed-out houses. On May 21st, British military police recognize him at a checkpoint near Lüneburg. His false mustache has begun to peel. Taken into custody and strip-searched, facing certain prosecution, he bites down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his mouth. He dies within minutes on the floor of a British interrogation room. In the autumn of 1945, the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg fills with prosecutors, translators, and defendants. Klieg lights illuminate the courtroom. Stenographers prepare to record every word. The architecture of post-war justice takes physical form in this repurposed German courthouse. Had Himmler's negotiation succeeded, had the West entertained even preliminary talks, none of this would exist in the same form. The Nuremberg trials rested on a principle. Nazi criminality was indivisible. Organizations like the SS could not be legitimized through diplomatic recognition. Germany's leadership would face collective Allied judgment, not separate bargaining. Himmler's death by suicide denied prosecutors their most significant defendant. But his failed negotiation paradoxically strengthened the framework. It demonstrated that Nazi leadership viewed atrocity as negotiable currency rather than moral absolute. The precedent established endures. War criminals cannot negotiate immunity. Humanitarian concessions don't constitute political legitimacy. Allied unity in demanding unconditional surrender wasn't merely strategy. It was foundational to post-war moral order. When modern international courts prosecute crimes against humanity, they operate within structures that Himmler's failure helped solidify. April 28, 1945, established that principle in practice before it was codified in law. A shortwave radio sits in an abandoned Hohenlichen office. The dial is still tuned to BBC German service. Sunlight streams through broken windows onto scattered papers. Himmler's notes from the Bernadot meetings, optimistic projections, contingency plans for transitional authority. Dust settles on the desk, where he waited for calls that never came. The illusion preserved in these documents isn't unique to Himmler or Nazism. It's the recurring fantasy of authoritarians who mistake temporary alliances for permanent kinship, who assume liberal democracies lack moral stamina, who believe everyone operates by the same transactional logic they do. Himmler thought the West would choose pragmatism over principle, power politics over justice, anti-communism over Allied unity. He was wrong on all counts. The radio continues its static hiss, broadcasting news from a world that has already moved on, already begun the trials, already started rebuilding. Himmler's gambit failed not because of bad timing or execution. It failed because he never understood the enemy he was fighting. He built strategy on ideological assumptions disconnected from reality. He negotiated with phantoms. When reality arrived in the form of a BBC broadcast, it destroyed him completely. In war, the most expensive error is believing your enemy thinks like you do. On April 28, 1945, that lesson was written in fire and failure. The radio still plays, but no one is listening anymore.